Here we have two of the most iconic Volkswagen Golfs ever made, the Mark IV and the Mark V R32. Since the launch of this car though, the debate has been, which one is better? The Mark IV came equipped with a 240 horsepower 3.2 liter VR6, a legendary engine producing those sweet, sweet Wookiee noises. It came standard with a 6-speed manual, all-wheel drive, and competed directly with the STI and the Evo of its time. Long story short, the Mark IV R32 is prime Piëch-era Volkswagen. The Mark V had a slightly beefed up 250 horsepower VR6, which it needed because it was 138 pounds heavier. With these gains came a 6-speed direct shift gearbox. We'll get into that choice a little bit later, and a big leap in technology, both driver facing and behind the curtain. Okay, I also know what you're thinking, and that's these are not the finest examples of what an R32 could be, and you're 100% right. But keep in mind, these cars are either over or almost 20 years old. So we're gonna look at the Mark V, we're gonna look at the Mark IV, and then I'm gonna show you, what owning an R32 is actually all about. And now you get the unplanned struggle cut of me opening the hood. Okay, now that we got all our nerdy stats that we love out of the way, it's time for me to give you my subjective opinion, call it facts, and compare the Mark IV and Mark V R32 in the proper way that only I can do. Let me just put it this way, if you ever really want to know how I feel, I own Mark IV R32s. I don't own any Mark Vs. I bought a Mark V and then gave it away. Twice! 3 times actually, that 09 I still haven't gotten any money for, so. End of the video there, done. Let's take a look at the two exteriors. First up, it's important to note that both of these cars stand apart from their GTI counterparts. Front bumper, rear bumper, side skirts, and rear wing spoilers are all kind of special to both of these R32s. Also, I just want to point out that these bumper covers, now if you can find one, are like $3,500 on the Mark IV, which is painful. Now, for me, the Mark IV stands apart as the better looking car. It looks a little smaller, it's a little more squared off, and I just like that better. When we compare that to the Mark V, it's rounder, it's bubblier, and to me, the Mark V's always kind of had this chunkiness that I wasn't really a fan of. Now, it's awesome because they're both red, 2-door Golfs. I think that's really cool. But to me, the Mark V just, it feels bloated. Bloated is the word I always like to use with this car, just kind of like you ate too much pizza and drank too many beers last night. Whereas when you compare that to the Mark IV, to me, it looks smaller, it feels smaller, a little bit more squared off, and that's what driving a Volkswagen Golf was really all about. A small, quick, nimble car that looks the part too. Now on the Mark IV, the factory Aristo wheels is one of my favorite OE Volkswagen wheels. That's what wheel is on this car now. They were painted black when I got this car. Compare this though to the Mark V. So this one actually has Atlas wheels on it, which always cracks me up because these Atlas wheels look better on every car I've ever seen them on than they do on an Atlas. It's really weird, I don't get it. There are a couple of places where I do think the Mark V wins out, and lighting is one of those places. These headlights, maybe not these exact headlights, but the Mark V headlights by Xenon, a much better light broadcast, especially when they're not all oxidized like this. The Mark IV from the factory in the US had plain old halogen lights that were not great, really. These are some aftermarket dealio that were on it when I got the car. They're really terrible and they need to be replaced. But front lighting, back end lighting, superior on the Mark V. Also, what was cool when the Mark V came out is that you could go in and code the convenience module and change certain lighting aspects of the car, which now that I think about it is probably another tick in the box for the Mark V, because you didn't have really any of that kind of stuff on the Mark IV. An unfortunate bit about the Mark V is this front chrome style grille that many of them came pre-drilled, that's not a word. Many of them came pre-drilled with the front tag on it, which is terrible if you live in a state that doesn't need front tags. They actually kind of don't wear real well either. You can see this one start to bubble a little bit right there. And if they're even still available, I think this piece is like $800. less than ideal for sure. Look, when it comes to the exterior, everybody has their favorite, and I totally get it. For me, the looks of the Mark IV win out. It's a step different from the GTI, more so than on the Mark V. When it comes to the interior though, the comparison's pretty good. There's a handful of categories we're gonna look at for these two different interiors: ergonomics, fit and finish, technology, and just the overall vibe that you get from the interior. When it comes to the Mark IV, this one wins for me without question. Not only is it a simpler interior, it feels like a more appropriate interior for the highest line Golf. A different steering wheel, vastly different seats. And I love the brushed interior that you only got on the R32, the GLI, and I think the 20th and maybe the 337. So it was not super common given how many Mark IV Golfs existed in the world. I also love the simplicity of it. We don't have a steering wheel full of buttons. We have a basic radio. Think about it this way. The Mark IV R32 came with a CD and tape player combo as your radio. Again, not riddled with buttons or flappy paddles. The feel and finish, well, maybe not the finish of this particular one, but when it was new, just the shaping of the steering wheel with the little R badge at the bottom and the way this steering wheel feels, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't need all the extra bells and whistles, right? It's just a well-cut, well-shaped steering wheel that gives you exactly what you want. Kind of a chunkiness, but also like a good refinement. I like it. But the thing that stands out in the R32 over everything else in the interior is the seats. These seats were only in R32. You had options for a cloth insert or a leather insert, or I should say pleather. Even though these aren't the best example of what these seats can look like, I love the wingback look. I love the bolsters both on the sides and on the cushion. This seat really does such a great job of hugging you both on the bottom and in the backrest. The Mark V has GTI seats with an R headrest. Now, it's not all hearts and flowers and roses for the interior of the Mark IV, or really for the Mark V, or I guess really most Volkswagens. This car did not age well at all. Everything, when it was new, had this like soft touch material on it, and it peeled right off. So you would get bits of your car, like this black trim here, for example, would have little white bits showing because of that soft touch peeling. You can also see, look at look at this. It's like the gumminess of the vent adjust. Well, it doesn't even work. Oh, look at it, actually came off on my finger. The Mark IV is also gonna always have like a special place for me because these cars were brand new when I started at the dealership. I remember being a really new technician and doing new car check-ins on these things, which was a whole nother thing that I'll save for a minute. But remember that time. You had the R32, refined, more grown-up feeling, right? Compared to the STI, far better all-wheel drive, much more power, and the Evo, kind of the same thing. All-wheel drive better, more power. If you remember what those drove like and kind of the interior fit and finish of it, to me, they didn't compare even close to what the R32 was. Every STI I ever have driven has been awful, straight up awful. And I hate that because I've always wanted to love them, but I just can't. Now, it's not all bad and sad in the Mark V. To me, the interior of this car is too much like the GTIs were, and that doesn't give you that special R32 feeling. The steering wheel is the same as like the Fahrenheits were, which are cool cars, but when you have the highest line of the model, I want it to be special. I want it to be different. I want to get in it and know without question, I'm in the highest line of that model. That said, let's be honest, the interior of the Mark V does feel more grown up, probably a little bit more refined, where the interior of the 4 is a little bit more raw. If you like technology, you got way better technology in it. Buttons on the steering wheel, cruise control on the steering wheel, auto headlights, a center console, right? These are all things that I actually think are really nice in the Mark V. Let's put it this way. For the most part, you're going to impress your date a lot more with the Mark V interior than you would with the Mark IV interior. Unless she has really good taste, then you know. Wife her up, or husband them up, whichever way. Interior schminterior, let's do the thing the car was built for and try I'll also warn you, this car has the newest generation Miltech exhaust on it. I started it up and legit, out loud, I was like, holy beep. I said a no word because it was way louder than I expected. All right, let's get this one out of the way. The thing that draws people to the Mark IV over the Mark V is the 6-speed manual transmission. We have almost the same engine in these two cars. We have almost the same all-wheel drive, if not the same all-wheel drive system. The major powertrain standout is going to be the transmission. Now, the Mark V was early DSG. The DSGs have come a long way, but I think there was like a lot of controversial and unhappy things that people were thinking when that car launched with the DSG. I love the DSG. I think in modern Volkswagens, it's the better transmission, fits the car more. Let me put it this way. The manual transmission, the Mark 8 Golf R, which only North America region got manual, is basically the same transmission as this car has in it. 20 years, no innovation. Meanwhile, the innovation in the DSG, tons, right? For now, let's focus on Mark IV. From a suspension standpoint, it was different than all the other Mark IVs, right? Different lower control arms, different knuckles up front. The rest of the Mark IVs were solid beam axles in the rear, where this is independent. Now, to me, the Mark IV is a better overall package, right? The interior to me feels better. The steering wheel, the shifter, the fact that it is a manual and you are a little bit more connected, the fact that it has hydraulic power steering versus electric power steering, the fact that everything's just a little bit closer and tighter, and it just feels like the small hot hatch type car that I think of when I think of a Golf. You got a 6-speed manual, box check. You have seats that hug you and like you really can fit in, nuzzle your butt on into. Check the box. It feels like a car that you're more a part of the experience with the car than the Mark V. That's why the cup holders are terrible, because you're not supposed to be drinking while you're driving. You're supposed to be driving. And to me, the Mark IV does a better job of presenting that than the Mark V did. I made a slip and said, always felt like. I haven't always felt this way about the R32. I started at the dealership right as these were new. And so remember seeing them, and you could get a GTI for 18 grand. And I remember looking vividly, looking at the sticker price of a silver with leather R32, like 29 grand. And I thought, who the hell would pay $29,000, this would be in 2004 dollars, for a Golf? It wasn't until years later where I got it. And that, my friends, is how you take a really cool car and absolutely ruin it. But we get to watch this guy go over speed bumps, and that's fun. The Mark V has some upsides and, of course, some downsides. Let's hit the downsides first. The one that I think really has positioned the Mark V in the view of the majority of the community is that it's not a manual. Now, I love the DSG transmission. The newer 7.5, 8 really shine with the DSG transmission. I think it's a better transmission and better suited for the car. This is like the early generation DSG, and it's just not as good, right? Get past the DSG shifts faster, like, yeah, we get it. This just isn't as good of a transmission as either the manual or the newer 7-speed DSG. I think if this car came with a 6-speed manual transmission, the likelihood of the Mark V being the preferred R32 is really high. Now, I'm not sure why they decided DSG in this one, but if you actually know why they did it, drop that in the comments, because I'm not really sure. To me, this car feels like a much bigger car. Like, even though I'm still kind of close to everything, just feels like a bigger car. And for some, that's great. For others, not so much. I like that small, compact Golf feel. There's no question to me that the Mark V is leaps and bounds ahead of the 4 when it comes to technology. Minimal power difference in the engines, but a better ABS system, which makes for a better traction control system. All that is so much better, so much more refined on the 5. The Mark V and the Mark IV are pretty similar when it comes to like engine tuning. I already mentioned DSG tuning. The Haldex tunes to me were not really something that was super impactful. It's not like today where on like the newer Golf Rs you're getting 50 horsepower. I don't know that I mentioned this when we were talking about the aesthetics, but there is something I really like about the Mark V, and that's the center exit exhaust. That was a really cool add-on that they did. It's different, and I think it gives it a little bit more of a sporty race car-y kind of feel to it. When I drive this car, it feels like I'm not driving a Golf. You're in something a little bit more highline, but still in the VW family, right? Like with that adult feel though, that you kind of get inside of this car while driving it, it makes me feel a little bit less connected to the car. I don't know if there's like a professional car reviewer word that you would use, because I'm not a professional car reviewer. It just feels kind of flat and numb. I mentioned something while we were talking about the interior though that was really special about the Mark V. That is that all of these were numbered, and this is 581 out of 5,000. So they made 5,000 Mark IVs for US. They did that on the Fahrenheits, the GTI, and the GLI. It's just another cool little thing to kind of feed what already is one of the most incredible communities that exist in the car world, in my opinion anyway, is the R32 Golf R community. Now, what also kind of lends some coolness to this car, but at the same time some heartbreak of this car, this is the last time a VR6 was in a Golf. This is the last R32. After this car, we moved to 2-liter turbo and to Golf Rs. I think the 7.5 probably will go down as the best overall Golf ever made, but there's just something that you lose in a 2-liter turbo that the VR6 gives you. Now, whether you prefer the 4 or the 5, there's something awesome that these two cars have in common. The aftermarket support is incredible. If you want to have a car completely stock like this Mark V here, you got that option. Lightly modified like this one with a super loud exhaust, no problem. If you want to do a complete teardown, engine rebuild, trans rebuild, limited slip in the rear, full paint job with a purple valve cover, making 500 horsepower, you can do that too. And as long as you don't do something like this S2000 right here, I think you're gonna be just fine. But why? Which brings me to this. Both of these cars are iconic Volkswagens. Think about everything around the R32. Wookiees in the Woods, an amazing community, events all across the country centered around a V6 all-wheel drive Golf. This to me is peak Volkswagen Golf. Now, as grumpy old boomer as this may sound, they don't make them like this anymore. Look, the Mark 6R, the 7, 7.5R, the Mark 8R are all awesome cars in their own right. Ton of power, great technology, fun to drive, probably safer, but no matter what happens in the future, there's always gonna be something extra special about a V6 all-wheel drive Golf.